but I think the main thing is you just felt stupid.
That's exactly how I feel. Yep. Hello, Seth.
Morning.
Good morning, Seth. Well, according to the sermon, you need to be kind to yourself.
I'll try to do that.
Okay, all right. So we'll begin in a second. I think we have some like full sparkling water.
Yeah.
So this is a new omnidirectional mic. And yes, thank you.
Okay.
All the mics. So we're gonna do like well, you'll hear it in a second.
Okay.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Glad that you're here. Hello, hello. Can you hear me? Yes, you can. I've got this new omnidirectional microphone that is plugged into my computer that will both be carrying my voice, might, and will hopefully pick up from some of you all. So Bailey, give me like a testing 1, 2, 3 in the back.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Can people hear that? Yeah, look at that, it works, great. So maybe this is a way, and then you all are, you're mic'd on the other side of that omnidirectional mic, so maybe people can hear you. So here, you guys do, someone speak.
Good morning.
Yeah, we can hear you because you're mic'd. Oh, man, okay. New strides in bridging the gap between the Zoom parties. So, so welcome. I thought maybe we get a chance to get together to talk a little bit about digital worship. I mentioned in the weekly email that there was a particular article in the New York Times by an Anglican priest who talked about basically churches should shut down their online option because it was having sort of corrosive effects on the church as a whole. She later published a sort of a qualified second article after that, and then there were numerous responses to her original article. I didn't really want to get into the specifics of that content. I really wanted to kind of stick to number one, our own personal stories with digital worship, and then also some of these larger theological principles that are independent of any particular author's article. So I want to start first with just getting us sort of telling our story, a quick look back. As a preview to the format of this, I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes. Then we're going to let you guys do some table discussion. Then we'll have some big group discussion, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more. So my story with digital worship began, of course, with this very first chapter of being totally overwhelmed, anxious, and also frustrated. Maybe you remember when we shut down almost 2 years ago in March, we did that very first service in the Good Shepherd room with someone's Sony handheld on a tripod. The audio would cut in and out. Sometimes the whole service would just like short out. And we'd have to, sometimes we would get going like a half an hour late, if you remember. there was always an issue with, then we moved to YouTube, and there was always an issue of YouTube not accepting our what's called the stream key. So there was this incredible anxiety every Sunday. Will we get an actual connection so people can see the service? There was also frustration because you remember the diocese made us shut down our service and do the diocesan service, which for some was great. For me, it was I always like to have a little more choice in things, and so that rankled a little bit. The second chapter, when I think about sort of digital worship and digital church in general, was this kind of moving into this phase of just being awestruck by the possibilities. And here we're talking about digital worship and digital church more generally. So this is like the ways that some of our book groups moved to Zoom, evening prayer moved to Zoom, men's group moved to Zoom. A lot of things transitioned to a digital format and actually saw an increase in participation. And some of you who are part of those groups can attest to that. I did a podcast group that was quite easy to come through Zoom. So really sort of like, I think many of us in the church, many of us pastors and maybe laity as well, once we sort of got over that initial learning curve, both these Zoom options for worship, Zoom options for program, and a live stream option for Sunday, it really seemed like it was going to be an amazing thing. We were also hearing about people who were able to tune into programs and worship from all over the country. So people out in Washington, former like relatives of people who just found us through the magic of the interweb would tune in. People who were former Christchurch parishioners who had moved for more sunshine south would tune in. Really kind of this chapter of amazement. I think the third chapter was we got better and better at doing this. Mostly, there were still obviously some really big hiccups along the way, but you as a church voted at the annual meeting at the end of 2020 to fund high quality cameras in the nave. To give a really good sound system, or to better integrate the sound system, so that we really were trying to mimic the National Cathedral, at least in terms of quality digital cameras, multiple camera angles, and as professional of a sort of mix in terms of production as my son could manage. My 15-year-old son, who's the one, Isaiah is the one back there doing it. And then so now I'm at this place where I'm sort of looking ahead, and I'm thinking about not just in these weeks ahead, but I'm thinking about like Easter season. So April 17th, I'm going to show a graph in a second of what the numbers look like. Someone's in the chat. I'm really bad at bravo to the tech team. Hello, great. Thank you. So I'm thinking about Easter. I'm thinking about next fall, like September 2022, and I can't imagine not remaining very grateful for online worship and for this digital reach. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the theological reasons why I will remain very grateful for that. But I'm also somewhat sobered by some of the weaknesses of digital worship. And I think that some of us in the church, I know it's for some pastors and maybe some of the laity have experienced this too. In the beginning, it really was all win-win. It was all both and. It was all like we can have our cake and eat it too. And now, I think many of us have been maybe somewhat sobered by some of the pros and the cons. And I think we want to be honest as Christians, as members of a community, as humans. We want to be honest about the ways that we engage technology. I kind of wonder Like, what would it have been like if the pandemic had hit in like 2008 or 2009, and the church had gone digital then? Do you remember how much optimism there was for technology in general, like 10 or 12 years ago? Like Facebook was going to save the world, right? Because we were going to connect the whole world. We were going to like empower voices that had never been heard. The smartphone comes on the scene, a revolution in personal technology. We just did a forum 2 weeks ago about addictions to social media from teenagers. We all know now that that moms with a 2-year-old have a hard time not looking at their Instagram when their 2-year-old needs attention. That we now, I think, have a little bit more of a sobered relationship and view of technology. It's not always pure win-win. And so I think we want to be realistic as we encounter both the pros and the cons, the strengths and the weaknesses of some of this technology. But first, and I'm going to get into more of that content after I let you guys talk and after we come back together. But first, why don't we do at tables and join into a table if you feel comfortable. And let's talk a little bit about your own story for 10 or 15 minutes. How would you tell your personal journey with online worship and online church in general? Have there been blessings and curses for you and your family along the way? And whenever we talk, we want to try to make sure everybody gets a chance to talk first once, and then we can kind of go back into that conversation. Tables with two, maybe move to a place where you can have a more in-depth conversation with others, or stay as two. It's totally up to you. Okay, some people, I'm going to. So you should see an invitation to go into the room. Please click on that, yes.
Members of the now situation. It was interesting within their church. So matters. How much?
So if you guys move.
How much church is now. So for me personally, I watch at home, but and sometimes I'm more like for that's all right that day for although today I
And then I was probably going to and this problem. Very small. Children down here out you. Like then we did. I'm actually.
Were you guys just talking like in the main room? Maybe because you joined after the. Oh. Okay, hold on. So let's try this. Let's try to share a little bit as a large group because I think we can't hear one another. So what are some things that you heard, or what are some things that you said in your small group that maybe the large group could benefit from, either live or feel free to just unmute yourself there at home.
Father Seth, may I say?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, this is Gretchen Holder. We ran out of time in our small group, but one thing I was going to share is I've been having long conversations with some family members. I have 2 cousins and their siblings, and they're having one of those sibling internecine wars. And we were talking about forgiveness, and today's sermon was wonderful and touched on the things we'd been talking about. So I'll have the benefit of sending the link to today's sermon and gospel, and it's just going to kind of drive home the bigger things we were talking about, and then maybe help these 2 people. One's in Arkansas, one's in Colorado. They're not Episcopalian, but I just think that the benefits can be spread like far and wide.
Yeah, I mean, digital worship in some ways turns even Episcopalians into evangelists. Because you can just forward. So like we're not people who stand on the street corner, but to forward a link to a service or to forward a digital copy of a sermon or an archived worship service, it's okay. That it feels a little different. So yeah, great, thank you. Other things like blessings and curses, your experiences of challenges or joys.
Seth, if I can say something, I'm sorry, somebody else.
No, go.
I think for me, and probably a few others, there was a great advantage, especially at the beginning, because
Oh no, wait, oh, I muted you for some reason. Hold on, Jim. Can you unmute yourself? I meant to mute me.
now am I back? Okay, now I can't hear you. But I found it really beneficial at the beginning because Ed was sick and I could still participate and not feel like I was leaving him alone. The other thing that I found, and I don't know how to describe this, but there's no getting ready and looking nice. And while that, it shouldn't be an advantage, we shouldn't worry about those things. It was nice to leave that behind and really put my focus on the service that I was watching or trying to experience. Same time, I get that you can get lazy and there's not the same sense of community when you're just watching it. But those are some positives, I guess, as well as the negatives. Now I'll mute myself.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, what's that? That was Jean Meyer, and I'll try to say their names. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so you save energy, you save mental energy, you save physical energy, not having to travel, not having to put pants on, whatever's going on. Yeah, Chris, we'll do one more and then I'll move in. Go ahead.
No, being a member of the choir, which is an honor and a privilege to be able to do that, both that we were able to make the virtual recordings that we could share. And that was a gift not only to us, for us, but to anybody that could open up YouTube and go, oh, let me listen to this song. So that was a real plus. But I have found, number one, because of the same reason, on a Sunday morning in the summertime, to grab a cup of coffee and not worry about reconstruction, but to be intimately involved in the service, where when you're wearing any kind of vestment, you're kind of aware of what's going on and what's the time and when's my cue and that kind of thing. But when you're at home watching a screen, you're going, this is about you and me and you and nothing else. And so I have found it to be intimate. I guess that's the only word, and enriching.
Intimate and enriching. Yeah, thank you. And you also bring up an interesting point that digital worship had allowed us to bring in some media into worship that we hadn't done before. So we would show these short films from Christian companies based with music. The choir's virtual anthems were incredible. And that was, we were incredibly lucky to have Julie Galkey as a production maestro for those. So yeah, so that's a whole nother genre, a whole nother good. Yeah, let's flesh these out a little bit more. And I'm going to I'm gonna narrow our focus a little bit. All right, we're gonna look at some theological principles, and we're gonna narrow our focus down from like all of digital church. And then so you can go all of digital church, that's like all the programs. Then you can go just to digital worship. But digital worship could also include Zoom worship. And Zoom worship is different than the live stream, because Zoom worship, it's what they do in evening prayer. Bailey talked about that at St. Boniface, that was their Sunday service. We've done some Zoom worship here. That's where everyone can see one another's face. The sound quality for music is horrible. Some huge trade-offs, and so we decided not to do Zoom, to do a live stream YouTube. So we're gonna narrow on Sunday live stream. And we want to do this beyond just the reason that we can, right? So this goes back to like human relationship to technology. We don't want to just do stuff because it's possible. We want to do stuff because it's good and it promotes human thriving. And there are plenty of ways that digital worship promotes human thriving. So these are some theological principles. How does live stream worship help us glorify God and better be the church? And so I have 4 of these. So, you know, since I've come here and it's not me, but it's you guys, this has been a place that radical hospitality existed before I got here, I think. So this idea of radical hospitality, the church should be a place of radical hospitality. And I think basically that is about God meets us right where we are. God welcomes us just who we are, where we are. And not just sort of where we are in our spiritual journey, but God, with digital worship, God welcomes us, God meets us right where we are, in any place, right? So Ed Liddell isn't on this particular one, but Ed has been battling cancer, and Ed was watching every day from his home, totally immunocompromised, but was attending every single service because we were bringing that right into his home. Kathy Dean was having some really serious health issues. Randy would come in, pop up the laptop, and she would be able to be nurtured by this place that she has been so spiritually nurtured for many years, and Randy as well. And then there's all these other stories where it's like someone is watching church on a bus, right? So like we could probably all go through like, where's the wildest place that we have live streamed that Sunday worship? A golf course, a boat, the beach. There's a lot of different places. So God meets us in any place, and God also meets us at any time. So this is one of the really interesting parts about the archived digital service, the archived live stream, is that we have a lot of people who are interacting with this content asynchronously outside of that little window. So there's some real hospitality in being able to say, you don't have to show up on our turn in our hour. You can consume. You can be a part of this at another time. And of course, that mirrors where almost all content has gone. Gone are the days when, if you wanted to watch Family Ties, with Alex Keaton, you had to be like in front of your TV, NBC, 8 p.m. on a Thursday night. All content is much more accessible now. Another principle, I think digital worship helps us spread the good news of Christ. And we talked already a little bit about, this turns even Episcopalians into evangelists. The Great Commission is Jesus telling his disciples to go out and make disciples of all nations. And so this is that aspect. I mean, my in-laws who are in like Lake Geneva, they watch almost every Sunday. They would not come up here. They wouldn't make that drive. More extreme example are the people who are in New York and who are in Seattle. This great sort of spreading effect that it really is at the core of what it means to be the church, to spread the good news of God in Christ as far and wide as possible. I think digital worship is also this really, it's a manifestation of the ways that the body of Christ is connected across time and space. So not just these people in New York, but when I look into that camera, when I'm like up at the altar and I look into that camera in the back, I have this picture of people in hospital rooms, people who are maybe in their own home, but they're really ill. I have pictures of like maybe a mom whose life is just like totally falling apart in a lot of ways and can't get it together to like, for no fault of her own, to get it together to bring kids to church. There's this way that digital worship, live stream is a great connector. Digital ligaments is a phrase that I've used before. And then lastly, I think the live stream worship really helps to sort of help us think about, and this is related to that body of Christ image, but God is more, God's people are more than a building, and God's power is not limited to a particular building, right? I heard some maybe it was Tom who said that over here. The Holy Spirit blows where she will, and the Holy Spirit is not limited to a physical building. So it's very easy for us as people who have a beautiful building, people who love our building, who've invested in our building. It's easy for us to sometimes overemphasize church as building. It's with a live stream service, you decenter the building as church, and you raise up this idea of God's power being not limited to a building. But this is where I want us to think about how live stream worship not just always glorifies God and helps us better be the church, but how can live stream worship potentially get in the way of us glorifying God? And don't worry, there's no danger of us like pulling the plug on the live stream service. I honestly think that article was written to get the article that Tish Warren Harrison wrote. I think that was like sensational to get. It's like clickbait, because she knows if she says, let's look at the pros and cons. I mean, her article was a little extreme, so maybe she was legit, and that wasn't just trying to get more readers. But there's no danger. There's no danger. This is grabbed from. These are our numbers. This is grabbed from yesterday. You can see where COVID numbers are really down here. This isn't a live picture, so it doesn't give you those numbers as I scan over. But we're basically where we were early October, where we were right before Delta hit. We're going a little lower every day. And so what I want us to think about is sort of a thought experiment. I'm thinking about a COVID-contained world in September 2022, which we don't know that will happen, right? So this is just an experiment, so sort of a construct. That things have really kind of died down. There's much less danger. People are generally in a place of safety when it comes to COVID. So we obviously continue to celebrate live stream worship for people who are compromised at home, those who are in the hospital or nursing homes, people on the road who want to stay connected. People who work on Sunday morning. This is another piece that there's a person who always has never really been able to come to Christ Church on a Sunday morning because they're working, they're providing. Those who Sunday morning unexpectedly fell apart. I think that's a beautiful part of live stream worship. But then what are some of the theological considerations for those of us who may not be in any of these categories? And just hear me out on some of these. Potential downsides of digital worship. I name human frailty as a potential downside of human worship. And here there's two aspects of this. We sometimes overuse things that are good, like screens, right? That's just like a part of our human frailty is like, I mean, the iPhone is like amazing. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing the way that this can connect me to people I love, to my enemies, so that I might get to know them a little better and not just make judgments about them. It's an amazing tool, but you don't have to, you can throw a rock and hit 100 studies on the ways that human beings can sometimes overuse things that are good. And sometimes we can do that because we sometimes, as human beings, as part of human frailty, we sometimes choose what is comfortable over what is good. This is just like, I mean, I just know this in my own life. I have a clergy group. We get together. It's like, do we want to do Zoom or do we want to get together in person? Well, if it's like at the bar, that's like half like 2.5 blocks from my house, like, yes. But if it's in Waukesha, like I want you in Waukesha to drive to me, but if it's in Waukesha, let's praise digital worship. And let's praise the digital option because it's just a lot of work and it's just a lot easier for me. But when I go to the bar in Waukesha and I'm there in real time, it's a richer experience. It's a powerful experience. It's different, and it's not bad on Zoom, but there's a different texture to it when I'm there in person. So I think we should be honest about that. And this leads to the second piece, a theological principle, God's creation, human evolution, the way God has set it, human evolution into motion. Our brains and our bodies, everything about them evolved to encounter reality in three-dimensional space, right? I mean, so Aaron Jake is a physical therapist over there, it's kinesiology, right? Like this is like, I mean, we are wired to experience reality in these very sensory ways. When you come to church, you feel the pew, you feel the kneeler, there's that great big heavy metal ring on the big oak door outside, you taste the host, hearing music in a space is different. I mean, the way that sound sort of cascades all around you. Jim gave this incredible digital presentation of the windows. And some of this actually cuts against what I'm saying here, because some of your slides were better than what you could see in real life. But there is something to be said for sort of seeing that real daylight as it cuts through those windows in real time. And the church has a smell, right? I mean, and I think it's a good smell. The church actually fires on all these different kinds of uses our full humanity in ways that we should acknowledge when you're there in person. Another piece of this, I think, is this active versus passive piece. So liturgical traditions often distance themselves from church as spectator sport. So I went to college in Wheaton, Illinois. I went to not very far from us was this brand new kind of church called Willow Creek. Willow Creek is a mega church. So I remember Maggie and I went and we checked out Willow Creek, and it was unlike any church I had ever seen. I grew up in a more evangelical world, but you went into Willow Creek, you sat in a theater seating, you were given a program, but you didn't really do a whole lot. Like there were people on stage who prayed, there were people on stage who sang. You never really rode, you just sat there in your seat, and it was a performance, and you took it in. You were there live, but you were taking it in. And I mean, I have to admit, it's a standard line that I use when people are coming here from Elmbrook or Eastbrook. I say liturgical worship is like really participatory. Like we make you get up, we make you kneel sometimes, we make you go eat. You got to eat something. You don't have to. You cross your arms, but there's a lot that we demand of you. In-person worship, it demands more from participants than when you're at home or on the golf course. Now, some people are better at this, I admit. Like I have trouble when I'm watching, like at the National Cathedral. I know I should be singing along, but I just can't. I can't do it. I know some of you actually sing. Like while they're singing those hymns, you're singing too. So for me, it's like especially passive, and I admit that. This is also sort of like a corollary. This is a corollary, I think, of this active versus passive. So, when we go back to coffee hour, if you're going to pull off a coffee hour, you need people to like set up the coffee hour. You need people to take down the coffee hour. When we were all in person all the time, you just had this larger pool of physical bodies to like do some of that labor. Sunday school, right? I mean, like you need teachers, you need a critical mass of kids. So there's a corollary of being here on Sunday morning, not just in the worship itself, but also some of the other things that happen. And then I think we should probably be honest about the ways that as a society, as a global community, we are caught in this epidemic of human isolation. There are loneliness is real and it is corrosive, and it can be really dark. And so we want to acknowledge that live stream worship is connection, but sometimes live stream worship is connecting alone. So if I'm like watching on a bus, I mean, in some ways that's super cool, right? I got my headphones on, like I'm able to maybe to tune in and connect. But is it different when I'm doing that as a lone person in my house or on a bus than when I'm actually like gathered with other people? Now I know a lot of people watch from their house with another person, so they don't necessarily feel that loneliness. In fact, maybe it kind of brings them closer together because we're a family, are all watching together. But sometimes like that convenience of being able to like watch by myself on a bus, you know, I just want us to name that there are some costs to that as well. And then lastly, there is a unique spiritual energy when humans gather. There is something that happens when like you get a bunch of human beings in the same room. And I remember like the first day of seminary when they were saying, you need to come to chapel. We're not the Baptists, so we're not going to take attendance on whether you come to chapel. But you should know that if you don't come to chapel, it's not like you're bad or your soul's in jeopardy, but we are one less as a communal group if you decide to stay home or sleep in. We are diminished because we don't have your beautiful presence live and in the room. And so I think we should just think about the ways that all of us, even as we get to make these choices, and that really is where we're at, right? We're not like lopping off an option to force you into this other option. We all have to learn how to negotiate with technology. That's just a part of being a human being in 2022. But things to think about, I think, as we do those negotiations. So I'm going to send you back into your groups. How do you think live stream worship both helps us be the church and potentially gets in the way? And then how, similarly, how do we use it well? And so we'll take 10 or 15 minutes to do this together, and then we'll come back as a big group.
I feel like we should talk about myself and explore about back and the downside.
Solitary use. Almost.
Yeah. For a while, had it on my house. Well, Well, I've done that with these too, in real time. Go back up, listen to that again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a real upside. That's been a real upside in our house. And I know that it was me too. One more minute. All right, one more minute, one more minute. So talk to Isaiah about how to work that. I think it's hooked up, I don't know. Sure. All right.
Yes, they allow them to, yes, that's true.
Okay, we're all back together. Okay, so. Hello, everybody. We can see you. You can see, oh, well, you can't see us. That would actually be here. I'll do this. So we've got a little bit of a view of who's here. There's people over there. Here and okay. So what do we want to share as a group together? What are some things that came out of your conversations? You can, if you're online, just speak up, or if you're in here, speak up. Hold on. Speak as loud as you can so they can hear your on the mic.
That's all. We talked about your term, spiritual energy, which seemed to us a really good term. And we thought of spiritual energy also as the presence of the spirit. And then we remember the line from the Bible, when gathered together in my name, I will be present, or I will be there with them. So we thought, is that more true of people who are there in person than it is of people who are online? And then we thought, no, because God's presence is everywhere. We are perhaps more tuned in to the presence of the Spirit when we're in person than online. So that was just a thought that sort of came out of our group.
Yeah, and that's a really deep theology, sort of the manifestation of the Holy Spirit and how it differs with a small group of 2 or 3, or even a single person or a larger group gathered. You know, you do. I totally agree. I mean, and that goes back to that theological point about. I think digital worship has really helped a lot of us who may have kind of been in this old mindset. No one can kind of like make an idol out of gathered Sunday worship more than a priest, right? Because I mean, like we track attendance. The bishop knows how many people are coming. There's all kinds of ways that we get obsessed about physical attendance. And so the pandemic in some ways was a great sort of liberator, because it's like, well, God's Spirit is obviously acting on all these people who are all over the place, many who are not coming on Sunday, but who are gathered in other ways during the week, or who are doing their own devotional work. So yeah, so let's not go back to making an idol of where God's Spirit shows up. Even as we also say, there is a special kind of energy with a larger gathering. Yeah.
I think there's agreement that one thing that clearly suffers, we don't have in-person worship, is friendship, and the power of friendship for people, but also the power of friendship for the church. And so all the ministries like serving at the gathering, teaching Sunday school, or men's group, or whatever it may be, those are best fuel when someone says, oh, our family's going to go serve at all people's on Friday night. Your family like to come. I think it's really hard to find a digital substitute for that. And I think it's really important, not just for the people, because we all want friends, but it's important for the church. And hard to make up for not in person.
Yeah, that's one of those, yeah. And I think that's I like how you sort of you bring up kind of like all the things that need to happen, all the things that the church does, but then you sort of inserted friendship as a bridge between. So it isn't, oftentimes people are brought into those ministries through a relationship, through friendship, And that is, it's harder. Can people hear that? Yeah.
So Seth,
Go ahead.
two comments that were made in our group. One, the reflection on Christmas Eve. I don't know if you remember that, Seth, but suddenly you tested positive for COVID and you were still able to preach, which was probably awesome for everybody, not the least of which is the other clergy, but that was an amazing thing. We also reflected on how that diocese, you know, the stream that we had to do before we could just be our own church. And to the point of friendships, it was nice to kind of see what was going on or meet some other people around the diocese, but we really felt like the connection, even if it was just technology connecting us to our own congregation, was nice. And then the other comment made about that is it opened our eyes to what it feel like to be in a church where you don't really know people, and reminded us of the importance of welcoming people.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I hadn't thought about that. It gave you kind of a sense of, like, those of you who have been members here for like 30 years, it's been a long time since you've church shopped. And so maybe it's that kind of experience of not knowing many people in the church gave you more of a sense of that. We're past time. Is there anyone who has a final last comment? Jean, I think you're trying to say something. Oh, you're muted. No, okay. Well, thank you all for just for kind of like thinking and projecting and sharing some of your own thoughts and experiences. This has been really helpful for me as I have heard you all reflect on your stories. There are things that I hadn't really thought about in terms of these strengths and weaknesses. I hope we sort of lean on one another as we continue to kind of move forward and we unravel what church is in 2022, what it will look like. And of course, we continue to celebrate all of the ways that people can stay connected through these tools. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.